Hi, this is an experiment with my daughter who's actually on our holidays. I know that some of you would like to watch podcasts instead of reading articles, and therefore I'm trying this as an experiment, and hopefully I shall be able to post companion podcasts with all of my articles for people who would probably like to hear a podcast instead of an article. This companion podcast is actually for my latest article on GA arbitration clause. And the reason why I wrote this article is, the incident of the Ever Given. I came to understand that the averages just had sought security from insured cargo interests by way of average guarantee, which provided for the LMA arbitration clause. I was not aware what actually sought from the cargo interest, the uninsured cargo interest. But given that the average guarantees and average bonds have similar wordings, I postulated in my earlier article that it would also generally provide for a LMA arbitration clause. I was puzzled that the cargo interests, the insured cargo interests who are aware of various issues, as to why they agreed to accept or allowed or acceded to the demand for security which provided for an LMA arbitration clause. And that is the reason why I wrote this article, setting out my thoughts and also inviting cargo interests to give their thoughts on why they acceded to. Uh, Basically, what would happen is when there is a contract, there will always be a dispute resolution clause. It is better to have a dispute resolution clause, otherwise, you would probably have to find a jurisdiction, the competent jurisdiction to hear the dispute. Therefore, at least in shipping contracts like the charter parties and bills of lading, you would have a dispute resolution clause which would provide jurisdiction for some jurisdiction, some court, or also look at other forms of dispute resolution such as arbitration. Arbitration is very common insofar as charter parties are concerned because the number of parties in a charter party context are limited, and even if there are a chain of charter parties involved, generally the overlying and underlying charter parties would be on a back-to-back basis, such that there would be not so many issues. In the case of containerized shipping, there are many parties involved. Let's take the case of the Ever Given. There were somewhere about 18,000 containers involved in this vessel, and therefore you would probably find that there would be a multitude of BLs involved, which may have different wordings, different jurisdictions, different dispute resolution process. Uh, if there is no specific provision in the GA clause, which again is incorporated in the charter party and the bill of lading, which provides for the dispute resolution, then the basis of how a dispute resolution will be resolved would be provided in the contract. What is there? So, absent provisions which are provided separately in the York and Forbes rules or in the on the GA clause, you need to look at the contract, the underlying contract. It remains theoretically possible that when a GA is arisen, parties can negotiate and agree that should they have a dispute, they shall look at some form of dispute resolution to deal with it. And therefore, it is contractually possible for parties to vary it or agree to something which is not provided in the contract. Uh, in the case of the Ever Given, obviously, I do not believe that the bills of lading issued would have provided for LMA arbitration. Instead, since the average register, had asked for securities on the basis of a LMA arbitration clause, therefore, if there's any dispute with respect to the GA, that would have to be arbitrated. Uh, the issue is, whether even if parties agree for arbitration, is the LMA arbitration clause the correct fit? In the case of charter party context, when there are limited number of parties, I don't see any issues. But in the case of when you have thousands of parties involved, such as in the case of Ever Given, then there may be a problem because the LMA rules do not specifically provide for consolidation. What is consolidation is if you have similar arbitrations being conducted, they could be joined together so that you could have the same arbitrators dealing with it. So there is no provision in the rules as far as the LMA arbitration procedural rules are concerned. However, it is technically possible that under English Arbitration Act, when if parties agree, they can consolidate the arbitrations. How it, in my understanding, that would rarely happen, because whenever there's a dispute, you would probably find that parties take a tactical position, and someone, one party may always say, listen, it is better to have parties fighting it separately, because having separate arbitration means increased costs, which may desist or create an impediment for other party to pursue them. If you look at GA, the basis of GA is basically equity, fair and reasonable. And therefore, if there is provisions in the GA or following a GA which do not specifically provide for equity, I think it would be incorrect for it to be allowed. Uh, and the reason why I say it is arbitration could have been used, I don't know, but it could perhaps be used to try to take a tactical advantage. And one of the tactical advantages, perhaps in arbitration, is that it is, at least in English law, there is an inherent duty of confidentiality. And therefore, if that was one of the reasons why arbitration was sought, then it is not equitable. The other thing is the cost. If the intention of using arbitration was to ensure that there is costs, substantial costs, because if each party has to have a separate arbitration, there would be costs to be incurred. Now, in the case of a container shipment, so if you take the average cost of cargo being loaded, it would be $50,000. I estimate it to be $50,000. I'm aware that sometimes a cargo could go to a few millions, but if you average it out, it would be 50,000. So, which means that some cargoes will be lesser than 40 or 30, because averaging out with a higher value of cargo, and which means that your GA sums at stake will not be more than this amount, the value of the cargo, and therefore it may not make sense to pursue, and that might be something which might be a limiting factor. So costs, having arbitration which does not provide for consolidation, might also be a limiting factor, such that parties who feel that they have an entitlement to dispute the contribution sought may not dispute it because of cost. So I think these are my thoughts, that perhaps it is not fair and equitable, and therefore it should not be allowed. I don't have a problem insofar as bulk is concerned, because in the charter party context, both the owners and the charters are on similar bargaining power, while it is not so, no, not so in the case of liner shipping. If it is decided that that for GA disputes it is better to be arbitrated, I think the right way is to look at it when the York Antwerp rules comes for revision. You could call all the stakeholders, including the cargo interest, discuss, look at a process which best suits the industry, so to say, and you can provide for it in the rules, including jurisdiction, including a seat, and I believe the seat should be more localized or more nearer to the location where the incident happened or where the port of refuge, instead of being geographically far off from where the incident happened. This would then result in saving of costs, localizing the issues, allowing parties to deal with it more expeditiously. Uh, I am, if you look at my previous articles, I've been always proposing for arbitration for shipping disputes, and I remain firmly convinced that is the best way to deal with it. However, I believe that if we are going to use arbitration, it must be fit for purpose. Uh, so those were my thoughts insofar as GA arbitration clause. I look forward to hearing from you if you have any comments. If you have been involved in providing security for the ever given, so far as cargo is concerned, I would be happy to hear from you why you agreed to the LMA arbitration clause. I also look forward for your comments on if you have any thoughts on what I said, because I would like to have more interaction to learn from you all. Thank you for hearing me. Have a great day ahead.